Now, this week, we will focus on the venture capital investments in India. And joining me on the show is the ex-Cisco chairman, John Chambers, who has, remember, been investing in India and is closely associated with the homegrown venture capital fund, Chirate Ventures, which is founded by Sudhir Sethi. So, John, Sudhir, good to have you on Big Deal. Now, John, coming straight to the point, your fund, JC2 Ventures, has been investing in India. What is it exactly that interests you here in India?
So what interests me so much in India now is that a country that is probably going to lead economically for the next decade, with a leader in Prime Minister Modi that understands what is necessary for the country to lead both in GDP growth, but also in income growth and job creation, and how startups and venture capital can play a key role in that. The other thing that interests me tremendously is the country's moving from a slow follower to a fast innovator. And so all of a sudden we're seeing startups which, if we were to be very candid, looking backwards, were clones of U.S. startups. We're now seeing startups that suddenly lead and will be not only a leader in Asia, but a leader in the U.S. So the country's changing rapidly. It's clearly at an inflection point, and I think now is the time to double down in India, which we both are.
Right. So, John, you have also been closely associated with Chirate Ventures. So, let me get in Sudhir in this discussion. Sudhir, what has been the focus of your fund, and how has really John played an important role in your venture capital fund, which I see has assets under management close to about $500 million, and you have lots of investments in the consumer side as well as fintech, health tech, and the whole gamut of the technology based companies as well?
I think Chirate Ventures, we are focused on technology investments in the country. I truly believe that India is reinventing itself. Business is reinventing revenue models, business models, new technologies, new processes, and scale is now, to my mind, at double the pace and half the time. And since we met John about a year back,
yes, we did.
And we've met a number of times, I've had the honor of meeting John, and John has been very nice to spend some time.
And I've had the honor of being your partner.
And John has been very nice to spend some time with us and our companies. Invested in a company called Unifor. The vision, the global scale, and the ability to coach entrepreneurs in how to scale on a global basis, especially in the US, right from strategy to hands down, for instance, recruiting. Last time I was at your place, I noticed that somebody who is heading sales in Unifor was coming out of your home. So that's an amazing knowledge and experience which entrepreneurs and even VCs like us don't have. So I think we are benefiting by that tremendously over the last 1 year.
Nisha, what's interesting is you're seeing organizations work together that before were not
working together,
aligned. Yeah. And so my skills are more as a strategic partner with the CEO, a coach for them, a mentor, help them grow and scale. The good news is I've been very successful in many things I've done. I've also made every mistake. And so I've seen the movie so many times. So my strengths are more in how you scale a company, how do you build culture, how do you do channels, how do you go global, how do you deal with your setbacks and challenges along the way. And I love developing that team. And that's where the two of us actually complement in terms of our skills of our organizations working together. And so this is what I'm trying to do in India, France, and the U.S., and I always align with key venture partners in terms of how do we win together and how do we help the country.
Yeah, and I think if I may add, John's intervention in India in the last 1 year in the venture investment world is a pivot to my mind for the whole industry. And the reason why it's a pivot is because it's a catalyst, especially in the B2B space, especially in the software space, which I must say has grown in recognition. It was not, a lot of the investment used to go into consumer, and I still remember our first discussion where your interest was in the B2B space and the software space as such. And one of our investments where John is there deeply involved is Unifor, and so I think John, I would not only say we are honored to have as a mentor to us, but he's a mentor to the venture industry in India, especially for the software side.
So let me come to the specifics then, John. Uni4 is an investment, which is a portfolio company of Chirate that you have invested in. You also recently invested through your fund, JC2, in Lucidius, which is a cyber security company. So what does it really say about the kind of interests that you have as far as sectors are concerned in India?
So the interests for tech firms, not just in India, but in the US and in Europe, are around market technology transitions and business transitions. So if you think about where I'm focused, it's the Internet of Everything, it's security, it's customer experience, it's artificial intelligence, etc. And what we're both excited about is we're starting to see that leadership, for the first time ever, start to come out of India. So when you think about what Uni4 does, it has the capability to change the customer experience in a way that candidly we think other companies around the world have not been able to do. And if you look at Lucidius with Saket Modi, he has skipped a generation on security, and he basically gives you a framework to where an enterprise or a government can determine how safe they are and what they have to do to dramatically increase their security or not, and even how you ensure it. So you have potentially two game-changing opportunities here. With all startups, there's risk, and they have a problem every week, which I've forgotten what that was like running a very large company. But you've got two companies that have a chance to be the leaders in their field, and they have the common ingredient of market transitions, being technology-driven, a world-class CEO who wants to be coached, customers, and both of them have the customers that are very supportive of what they do in a big way, and they have the chance to be one or two in their industry. That's what you look for as an investor, but mainly I'm here to coach and grow headcount, and I think the financial benefits will come from that.
Right. So, Sudhir, as I look at your portfolio, you have some very interesting companies. You have well-known companies like Flipkart and FirstCry, CureFit, also Lenskart. So these are all well-marquee names in the startup world. What interests me most over here is Flipkart. Can you tell me more about the investments? Did you make a complete exit with the Walmart transaction?
Yes, we did. We did. We were the first investors in Myntra, and then Myntra grew from almost zero revenue in 7 years to about 100 million revenue and was bought by Flipkart. That's how we engaged with Flipkart. We also invested in additional capital in Flipkart, and now with the Walmart transaction, we have exited.
And what is the kind of returns that you have made out of this?
Good returns.
I was wondering how you're going to handle that.
What do you describe as a good return, Sudhir?
No, I think, without getting into numbers, Walmart coming into India is a very big pivot. Now, let me explain why. First, it reiterates the fact, unlike many other countries, India is a global open economy. Here you have Google, you have Facebook, you have WhatsApp, which, if I compare to China, is not there. Right. So Walmart is an open economy. Any international organization can come in. I think the other thing is that Indian entrepreneurs have grown Flipkart, Sachin and Binny Bansal have grown Flipkart to an amazing scale, and that is what interested Walmart to come in.
Right.
And the third thing which happened is it is a scale which is unprecedented. It's now in the top 10 in the world. Right. India is now giving scale. I think one of the challenges which India faced earlier was India had not given global scale. Flipkart has given a global scale. Fourth thing which is a pivot is that the amount of capital which has come in, and it has given exits to many investors, and Indian investors including, because we have a lot of investors in India who were also investors in Flipkart, that is rupee investors. Right. It has given a fillip to India and saying, hey, there is a phenomenal exit opportunity in India. So I think this has given a fillip to venture capital, angel investing, entrepreneurship. Now many more entrepreneurs want to become the Bansal founders.
Yes, that is the larger question, really, Sudhir. You read my mind, because probably the Flipkart-Walmart deal reinforces the kind of faith that the venture capital funds in India will have going forward as well. So has it given... So now more and more venture capital funds are looking at good exits. There is some more confidence in the kind of returns that they can make in India.
Absolutely, and I think this is a reality. I know we've been giving returns every year for the last 5 years. However, let me add one thing. It is also very important to note that when we started investing in India 12 years back, we just saw in the first quarter 65 new companies. That's it, in the first quarter. Today we are seeing about 600 per quarter. And that's a tenfold growth in entrepreneurial activity in the last 10 years.
Right.
If I take and again in our business, I think crystal ball gazing is very dangerous. Right. But I'm going to risk that and say, hey, in the next 10 years, entrepreneurial activity in India is going to grow at least 20-fold today. You will see at least half, if not more, of the BSE 30 index companies being replaced by entrepreneurial companies from India.
So key takeaways, Nisha, in my mind, is you've got a country that is transitioning, political leadership that understands the value of that transition. Startups are the engine for all the above, and you're seeing a exponential startup pace. If the government continues to make the tough decisions to really create the right environment, this will be the top economy in the world, not for 10 years, but perhaps for 20 or 30.
Longer years, yeah.
So the framework's been laid for a good 5 or 10 years. Now we'll see if we can take it to 25.
Yes. So John, with your experience coming in from the Silicon Valley, how do you see the venture capital scenario in India? How much more further we need to go to really come up to the global standards the way we see in the developed world?
Well, if I could break the question into two pieces, I think the venture capital world is at a similar inflection point. India was viewed with mixed views about being a good place to invest, and candidly, your company was kind of the exception in terms of the staying power and getting the results.
Right.
You're now seeing a market start to take off both growth-wise, but also a market starting to take off in terms of the opportunity and share that. So I think you're in the early stages. I know it's a baseball term, but if you were to say 9 innings in a game, we're probably in inning 2. And I do agree with the optimism that this looks like the place to be for the next couple of decades if things continue. So,
John, to my question, now Sudhir just enumerated the kind of growth in entrepreneurial activity that we are seeing here in India. And how do you really gauge which are the good companies to invest in out of the many that are brimming and coming to you with their ideas?
Well, this is where one of the things I talked about, and I wrote a book literally to help the startups, because the startups and the VCs were asking the same questions around the world, whether it's in Dubai or the US or India, about what do you look for in terms of market transitions, and what do you look for where you invest. So what I focus on is the market and also the technology-enabled transition that goes with that. The second thing I look for is the leader of the company, and are they a world-class leader? And candidly, the two that I've invested in, both of those CEOs could play in Silicon Valley with a much bigger company if things go well. I then look at their customers, and do they say this is a company that they're going to bet a lot of their future on, knowing it's risky to do investments with startups, and knowing also in terms of the direction what has to change as an organization. They're at an inflection point where they can be number 1 or number 2, and they're also at a segment they could perhaps see 2 to 3 to 400% growth for 5 to 10 years.
5 to 10 years, yeah. If I may just add to that, Nisha, the way we look at is the first phase of Indian entrepreneurs was solving the problem of accessibility. Consumers in India did not have the right product at the right price and the right quality.
Completely agree.
And predictable.
And it wouldn't go global.
And it wouldn't go global.
Agreed.
However, today, if I look at our investments today, they are solving real problems which are in India. And I'll give you some examples. If I look at one of our companies called Wayana Networks, there is a big challenge. There is capital available in India, but the small and medium enterprise do not get it. So this is a technology marketplace which enables an efficient mechanism to get available capital to small and medium enterprise. It's disbursing about 120 million a month right now. And by the way, the growth patterns are, as you rightly said, 200 to 300% per year. If I look at the whole area of health, fitness, healthy food, the whole area of fertility, the whole area of cancer, the whole area of ophthalmology, and many such spaces, we are finding entrepreneurs are innovating. They're working in large companies, which could be international or domestic. They've learned there's a problem, and they want to solve it and create a new company, and not solve it as part of a large conglomerate.
Right.
The key takeaway is your best and brightest from your schools now want to go do startups,
yes,
as opposed to a large company or a large consultancy group or a government. When you see your talent go into the startups, you by definition begin to see the innovation occur at a faster pace, and that's why we're both so optimistic about the future.
Right. So John, when it comes to JC2 Ventures and its plans in India, how much have you invested so far, and what is your plan going forward?
Well, very similar, watching how you handled that question of investment. I've invested in 2 companies already. I intend to take that up to 5 in terms of my focus. And in terms of what I'm really doing is I'm heavily involved with the whole startup community here in India, looking at how you focus on making this across all 29 states. How do you create the right tax laws and ability for VCs to stay here? How do you get the IPO market so the exit strategy will be for IPOs here in India, not having to move to Singapore or to the US to make it happen? And how do we get the market big enough here as it should be with 1.3 billion people and becoming probably the #3 economy in the world in the not too distant future in terms of the focus?
And I must say that it's 1.3 billion people. I consider it as 1.3 billion great ideas to invest in.
Yeah, but the other point of debate has also been that is it our demographic dividend or maybe a liability. Anyways, that's a separate discussion altogether. But John, any investor who comes in and makes the investment always has the exit opportunities and the return in mind. What is it that you're looking at in terms of these options that are available to you? Are there many as far as your exits are concerned, and in terms of making high returns from your investments?
Manisha, one thing that might surprise you is I had the chance to change the world once with the internet at Cisco, and that was as important to me as the financial returns. Startups are going to be the primary job creator, and it needs to be inclusive across all states and all countries. And so my role here is as much a spatial purpose focus on job creation and doing that on a scale, whether it's my investments or the whole country. And so I want to play a small role in the future of this country. And by the way, if I invest in a couple startups which do well, I'll get the financial return. My experience has always been wherever I did the right thing, corporate social responsibility, the right thing in terms of creating wins for the nation, I also did the right things in terms of getting the business return. So I would not think of me as the traditional American venture capitalist. I would think of me more as a coach, a strategic partner with these startups. And like today, I met with the Young Turks Association here. 17 of your hot startups, coach them on opportunities, mistakes they'll make, directions. I've seen the movie so many times, made the mistakes and the successes so many times. I love teaching, and then doing that on a more global basis across this country, and to be able to do that across 29 states is my ambition. And it's also why I'm leading the U.S.-India Strategic Partnership Forum. I'm focused about how the businesses in India and the U.S. work together, including startups.
Right.
This requires the country, the government, the venture capital world, the education system coming together, and we both are saying it many times, we think there's an inflection point occurring in a very positive way in India.
Yep.
This is not the India of 5 and 6 years ago.
Right.
It's potentially the India in the future that might be the best economy for quite a while.
And I must say we are very lucky as investors and entrepreneurs in India to get John's time. I remember last time you came, you spent time almost 3 hours with 22 software entrepreneurs.
Yes.
And I must tell you, they were mesmerized.
Well, you selected well because they were a lot of fun too. But that is different. If this would have been 4 years ago and I would have come to India, I would have had trouble getting even 5 or 6 companies that I thought could play at that level.
Yeah.
Now it's more a matter of you see this in so many areas and they want to be coached and they're hungry.
Right.
And when you have a venture capital partner who knows the local market, that's where you have the chance to potentially, I think, make a difference.
Yep.
Fun.
Tell us more about the kind of hits and misses that you have had and the learnings from your investments.
I think we've had more misses than hits, I must admit that. But some of our companies, if I look at who are now market leaders, we have 9 market leaders. Our portfolio is 76. We have now active about 55 because most of the others we have exited. We have noticed a few things. Wherever there is a success of the entrepreneur succeeding and gaining dominant market share in the country to a #1 position, obviously, as John mentioned, great entrepreneur. I think that goes without saying. Large market and a large growing market. However, there is 4 parameters which we look at apart from that. One is the whole space of disruption, and within disruption, it's a process disruption, it is a transition in the market, it's a new model, revenue, or a business model. Is it a disruptive technology or is it a disruptive product? I think we've seen that wherever there are at least 3 of them across the companies, we've seen those companies scale much, much faster.
Sure.
The other thing which we are now seeing is very important is the advent of rupee capital in the country. If I look at the venture capital phase of the last 12 years, there's phase 1, or let's call it India VC 1.0, where only international risk capital was available in the country, only.
Right.
However, in the last 3 years, I would call it VC 2.0. And the reason for that is about 5 to 6% of the capital now is Indian families and institutions, and especially SIDBI, which is to me like the sovereign fund of the government of India. Now, I do see in the next 5 years this 5% of total capital available to VCs in the country going up to something like 15 to 20% as such. And these industries who are now, or industrial family offices, or banks, or insurance companies, and SIDBI, of course, they're all customers, by the way. They're all customers to our companies as such.
Right.
They're also potential acquirers. So more and more Indian rupee capital comes into the venture investment world. You will find local exits taking place.
Right.
And that's a big, big trend which I see happening in the next 10 years. Local exits.
While Sudhir is talking about rupee capital, and there are many homegrown venture capital funds which are really fueling the growth for the entrepreneurs here, John, how is the outside world really looking at India at this point when it comes to venture capitals?
The outside world, I think, is getting much more optimistic, especially in the last year. I think if you were to go back 5 to 7 years ago, the outside world got excited and candidly then disappointed. Yes. And that had to do both with there was not a good exit strategy. Indian companies could not acquire startups very easily. The tax laws actually discouraged IPO and setups. You're seeing that changing. So now you're beginning to see the outside venture capitalists start to invest, and you're seeing funds such as even huge ones like SoftBank come in a big way. You're seeing Amazon and Walmart make investments here. So you're seeing a recognition that India is not only on the startup stage, India is starting to hit this inflection point, I believe, better than any other place in the world. We'll see if we're right on that or not.
I wanted to ask John about one more thing. So, John, what do you think about, you've spoken about the inflection point, but help me understand the kind of sectors, the kind of companies that you would be interested in. Is the drone space something that you think has the potential of growth?
If I were giving advice to the people watching this and saying, where should I invest? You should invest when a industry is in a business market transition combined with a technology transition. So the hottest startups today are in the area in terms of business to business, areas of customer experience, what Unifor does as an example. Artificial intelligence. I have one of the 2 hot startups in the U.S., one of them going from $1 million a year to over 80 million in 1 year. So artificial intelligence is a key area. Internet of Things, of which drone is nothing more than a flying robot, is a very interesting idea. Interesting enough, defense of that is one of the hottest areas I'm involved in with a company called D-Drone. If you're making a drone plane,
Right.
That's probably not as interesting. That's commodity, and candidly, the Chinese, with a company, very good company, DJI, are dominating that field. If you're using drones to look at how you do maps, if you're using drones to say how you do more effective mining and how do you basically do the analytics, if you're using drones to perform issues that are dangerous for humans to do, that area has a lot of promise. But think of drones as flying robotics. Think that probably 20 to 40% of the jobs that are done by humans today will be done by systems and capabilities. Back to the example of customer service, by 2025, probably 95% of the interface on customer services will be done through artificial intelligence, natural language processing. So I try to pick those areas that are in transition where the player can be the #1 player on it. So certain areas of drone technology is of interest to me. Certain areas are not, being very candid. But I think that's true of any of these technologies.
Sure.
So, okay, so John, how do you see and rate the Indian internet space compared to the outside world, compared to the Silicon Valley at this point?
The Indian startup pace or investment pace, did you say?
No, so the Indian internet space.
Oh, so if you think of the internet as the enabler of all this, and just to give your viewers a quick update, when Cisco started 30 years ago, there were 1,000 devices connected to the internet. Today, there are 20 billion. We're on our way to 500 billion in 10 years. And so how well you do this infrastructure and how you bring it across the whole country and how you build broadband and how you bring this to each home over time is very important to all of these startups. So think of the internet architecture build-out that you're doing in this country as the interstate highway system, which enables all the other economies and people to participate throughout the country on it. Your advancement of network connectivity in the last 4 years has been amazing. What Mukesh is doing, for example, is build out the most complex network in the world, probably 7 times the capacity of the U.S. And so you're going to be able to do healthcare, Internet of Things, applications that other countries are not able to do or you couldn't have done 4 to 5 years ago. So I think of the build-out of the digital infrastructure as the highway system which allows all the other industries and people throughout the country to participate in it. Would you agree with that?
So I think absolutely. If I look at the consumer side, Nisha, all businesses, right from Flipkart to Lenskart to FirstCry to Policy Bazaar to Ola, you name it, all of them so far have been built on a consumer base who spends money on the net, which is anywhere between 20 to 40 million consumers. That's it. The winners today have been built on a 20 to 40 million consumer base who is the upper end. Now, if I take the next 5 years, this number will go to 150 million. So if I look at a 5-year time frame, there are 150 million who will now buy and sell on the consumer side. And if I take a 10-year time cycle, and I'm taking averages here, this number should go up to 500 million. So effectively, we are seeing now this is the scale which India will give us.
You know, what is fun is those numbers sound dramatic. I think they're way too conservative. Okay. I think with what you did as a country with demonetization, to where you gave the average person account a chance to be able to participate on that, system, I think there's going to be a faster scale up, and I think building out the different digital infrastructure and then taking this into the communities and over time all the way into the homes, I think that will allow you to probably do numbers well above that. We'll see if I'm right or wrong on it, but I've seen this movie before.
I hope you're right.
Hope so.
So very positive commentary coming from both of you in terms of the venture capital funds and the investments here and how promising the investments are going to be going forward. So you both are going to invest in a meaningful way in years to come. And with that, I thank you both for joining us on Big Deal. Thanks so much for joining us on CNBC TV 18, and thanks to all our viewers for joining us.
Nisha, it was a pleasure. Thank you very much.